Welcome to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast for farmers and ag professionals by the Iowa Farm Bureau, bringing you the news, experts, and educational insights that matter most. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to our February 17th edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Andrew Wheeler, and today's episode features three farmers who are carving unique paths in agriculture. Meredith Nunikoven, who runs a farm and floristry business in Mahaska County called Barn Swallow Flowers. Lily Beringer-Kroc, who sells her family's beef and a variety of other locally produced goods online and in person through her business, Beringer Family Farms in Jones County. And Dan Venteicher, an eastern Iowa farmer who's better known by his roughly 2.5 million followers across TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram as the Iowa Dairy Farmer. We'll start with Meredith and Lily, who took time to chat with us after presenting to their peers at Iowa Farm Bureau's Young Farmer Conference last month. Like many young farmers, Meredith Nunikoven began her farming career looking for an opportunity to carve out her own niche, and she found it in flowers.
So back in 2010, my mom and I had an interest and love for flowers, and we wanted to diversify our overall farm operation, which is mid-sized small farm under 500 acres. We have row crops. We used to have animals, swine and feeder cattle. Since we lost that animal portion of our operation, I know it was my mom's dream to continue to diversify for sustainability, and part of that reason was diversification is the key to resiliency, right? And so flowers, we love flowers. My grandmother had a love for flowers. Why not try fresh cut flowers? And so we took classes at Indian Hills Community College to just learn how to germinate seeds. From there, it grew into a business. Now we're in our 15th year. We offer online sales of dahlia tubers, spring bulbs, tulips, allium, daffodils, and also peony tuber roots. I am also development of a value-added product called a compostable vase. So a lot of things are happening. We have a farm stand. We go to Des Moines Farmers Market. We're very diversified just in the flower operation, but we are creating value-added products too.
Lily Beringer-Kroc is carrying on a proud farm family legacy as well. And like Meredith, Lily's making her own way.
So I'm a third-generation farmer. My grandpa started in the 1950s, and that was my dad and my uncle, and I'm one of 5 in my immediate family and one of 26 grandchildren that's taking over our family farm. We've always been beef farmers, but I took a little bit of a different approach and launched a direct-to-consumer business back in 2021, where I sell our home-raised animals as dry-aged individual cuts, and we offer shipping to all 50 states, and also just recently opened a farm store where we offer our beef also to the local community, along with other products like baked goods and produce, milk, cheese, honey, kind of like a one-stop shop farmers market type store.
Of course, it's exciting to start something new on the farm, but Meredith says blazing a new trail comes with its own set of challenges.
So our largest challenge back in 2010 was access to information. At that time, there weren't online classes. There was a lack of social media. That wasn't there. All we had was professors from, Indian Hills or some area gardeners to help us in this effort with really small greenhouses. So what we had to do was a lot of trial and testing and kind of wading through that effort for probably, I would say, almost 5 to 8 years. Once online education was released, a big, powerful education movement through Aaron Benzakein from Florette out in Skagit Valley, Washington State, that opened up a whole new world for us, because it wasn't just about the growing of the flowers, but it was the marketing and sales portion of the flowers, how to wrap them up, how to sell them, how long do they have to stay in water before you can give them to a customer. And now it's gone into a whole other dimension of inviting people on the farm for you pick or to attend our farm stand.
When you're just getting started, you've got to be willing to adapt and, as Lily says, get scrappy.
For anybody trying to start something new, the inputs and cost of things getting started is very difficult. And I had just graduated college, moved home, and actually purchased my grandparents' home farm kind of unexpectedly, and so I didn't have much extra cash laying around. So I thought outside the box, got a little scrappy, found some freezers on Facebook Marketplace, and really just started out with what I had and really grew from there. The Farm Bureau was a huge turning point and help with that. I was the Grow Your Future Award winner back in 2022, which allowed me to purchase a walk-in freezer to drastically increase my freezer space, which in return increased my demand and my sales.
When it comes to advice, Meredith encourages her peers to learn valuable lessons while their business is still small, rather than rushing to scale up too quickly.
I think there is just this push to scale fast, and I don't think anyone wins doing that, no matter how good the tech or anything is. I think starting small and learning valuable lessons quickly is better than financially losing like your whole operation. So scale appropriately, start small, do your research, talk to lots of people, go and see other operations, go to conferences like this, the Young Farmers Conference, Acres of Opportunity. Those are great places to hear from people, talk to them, and get their feedback. Do your online education. Never stop learning. Learn from the best. Take what they're advising and maybe apply some of it to your operation. Test, trial, test, trial, test, trial. Take good notes and realize if it's not working, try something else. That's what's so great about farming, that maybe your ground or whatever access you have to land, that's not the same for everyone. But if you really have a goal in mind to go somewhere and do that, make it known. And I hope you get to where you're going if you put in some sweat equity and some hard work and valued time.
Meredith also encourages aspiring farmers to seek out the kind of education and even off-farm experience now that will serve their farms well into the future.
I was that kid where my parents told me to leave the farm to come back with something. And they said, don't dare come back without an education or something to offer. We're a small farm. There's only so many incomes that we can take off of this. I commend my parents for doing that because I have an undergraduate and a master's in business. And through that, I applied in a corporate job. I used to work in the film industry. I learned how to work with people. I learned about money. I learned how to get equipment. All these things that I did in my job in the film industry, I've then applied to this. The social media, the website stuff, that comes with time and learning. But I would say learning off the farm is just as important as learning on the farm.
Like Meredith, Lily encourages her peers to start small and learn on the job.
I would say my biggest piece of advice is just to start. You don't have to know it all, and you don't have to have it all in order to get started. I didn't start with the big fancy walk-in freezer and the big fancy freezers and all of the beef. We started with one head and a few test freezers that I found for $100, and it's expanded from there. So slow growth is way more manageable, especially when at the time I was starting my side business on top of working a full-time job and full-time farming. So we can all relate that we always have a lot going on, and so trying to not overwork yourself too is a big thing.
It's definitely going to take a lot of work to build the farm or ag business of your dreams, but Lily says it's worth it.
It is a lot of work, but it's also very rewarding. And I think my favorite part is just knowing that our family is raising a high quality, nutritious product that people can trust and be able to feed their family, a high quality protein source. And the awesome part of kind of what I've built as far as my social media presence and being online is just connecting with consumers. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know what kind of stories they're going to tell. And I just am, I guess, a very social person. So I just love the customer relationship and connecting and meeting new people.
Thanks to Lily and Meredith for taking time to share their advice for beginning farmers with us and with their peers at Iowa Farm Bureau's Young Farmer Conference in Des Moines last month. That conference was attended by more than 500 young farmers and ag professionals across the state, and it's just one of many opportunities Iowa Farm Bureau offers beginning farmers who are looking for information and resources to start or diversify their ag businesses. In the interview, you heard Meredith refer to the Acres of Opportunity Conference, which is Iowa Farm Bureau's annual event for aspiring and beginning farmers who want to learn about niche crop and livestock options. And you heard Lily refer to winning Iowa Farm Bureau's Grow Your Future Award, which is a competition that allows young Iowa farmers to pitch their ag-related niche market, unique service, or specialty business for a chance to win cash prizes up to $10,000. In fact, we'll be accepting new applications for that Grow Your Future Award starting in just a couple of months, so keep your eyes open for that. For more information on both of those programs and a lot more, take time to reach out to your county farm bureau or visit iowafarmbureau.com. Next up is Dan Venteicher, a dairy farmer from northeast Iowa who's better known by his roughly 2.5 million followers across social media as the Iowa Dairy Farmer. The American Farm Bureau recently invited Dan to share his social media story and other insights with farmers across the nation at their annual convention in San Antonio. That's where Iowa Farm Bureau's Zach Bader caught up with Dan Venteicher, the Iowa Dairy Farmer.
I'm joined by Dan Venteicher, who is better known by his nearly 3 million followers as the Iowa Dairy Farmer. So Dan, let's just start by, in a nutshell, tell us how the heck did that happen? How did you go from farming in Strawberry Point there, dairy farm? How did you go from that to having the following that you have on social media?
I'll start with the funny story because I don't know. And I'll explain why I say that's a funny story in a little bit. But started dairy farming when I graduated college. I grew up dairy farming, so I shouldn't even say I really started because I've always done it. But officially moved into owning capacity shortly after graduating Iowa State. I graduated in 2013. 2015, my uncle retired, bought half of his farm with my brother. We formed Honey Creek Dairy, bought the other remaining assets from the farm from my dad a few years later. So my brother and I own Honey Creek Dairy, which owns the majority of everything we farm. So that was in 2015. So for those first, 5-6 years pre-social media, before I got on social media, I was obviously consuming a lot of social media, but a lot of that time was spent just working. We milked in a parlor. We farmed all of our own acres, raised all of our own replacements, raised all of our own calves, did most of our own work ourselves. So there wasn't enough time for anything else. 2020 rolled around, I should say summer of 19, we built a new barn. And so in 2020, we turned the robots on. January 7th of 2020, we turned on 3 Lely A5 astronauts and a Lely Vector, the automating feeding system. A year after that, we also put in a automatic calf feeder. So the automation is what created enough time to be able to even contemplate other ventures, say social media. And a lot of that extra time it lent itself to being able to, contemplate, like, is this something I want to do? Because I might have the time to actually do it. There's been other colleagues who are still on TikTok and social media and Facebook today who I saw them posting, and I thought, well, if they could do it, I think I could give it a shot too. And so I did. TikTok, I did my first one, I think March 1st of 2021. I was kind of anti-Facebook at that time just because I just thought TikTok was this great new invention, and it took off. I underestimated how little people knew about dairy farming. And I think the robots were a big draw. People never thought a cow could get milked by a robot. And so that naturally drew a lot of people in, the excitement towards the technology. And any video I would show with the laser scanning teats, it just automatically was guaranteed a certain amount of views just from a clickbait perspective, like what,
Sure.
From a person consuming social media, what the heck am I looking at? I want to see what this is. And then we kind of started leaning more into, I don't want to say going after, vegan activists, but some of the early content that got traction quickly was taking an argument a vegan activist is making, blatant lies about the dairy industry, and then saying, hey, no, here's actually what the truth is. And I think farmers, but also non-farmers, urban people, responded well to seeing somebody just stand up to people who come off as bullies. And a lot of those vegan activists do come off just as bullies, and nobody stands up to them. And I think that resonated with people. Ultimately, the reason I started off this answer with I don't know how we grew the following is I was talking to a friend of mine after, it was actually a local Farm Bureau event. I was up at a Minnesota Farm Bureau event, banquet. And after the event was done, a gentleman came up to me because I had made the same joke to him, like, I don't know how we grew the following. We did, because I'm doing a lot of the same things other creators are. granted, we do things maybe sometimes with more tact, or my wife and my parents have always joked that I've been given the gift of gab. I can talk and relate to people. But this gentleman had said his banking company, I don't remember what financial institution it was, but held a little workshop for their company. And they brought in experts from Meta and TikTok. So Meta being Facebook, for those who don't know. And they were showing this company, here's how you grow following. Here's all the good things to do. Follow this, try this, post so many times a day, post at this time, do this kind of content, don't do this, do that. And then they brought up an example of here's somebody who grew a massive following and we don't know how. And it was me. And so not only do I not know, but Facebook and TikTok don't know either how we did it. So that's not helpful to anybody. Really, if you really corner me on why I think we did, I do think a lot of it does come back to people don't want to feel stupid. And I think there's been a trend a lot of times. It's not even just with farming. It's just kind of our human nature in general is if I know something, I'm smarter than you. I never wanted to come off smarter than other people. And people don't want to feel like they're stupid. So a quick example, and I'm getting long-winded with my answer, but a quick example is there was a farmer on TikTok. I don't want to say his name because he's a great guy. But he has a certain kind of planter. It's a 3-point planter. It folds kind of weird. And I had never seen anything like that before. And so me and a bunch of other people were in the comments asking, how come you have this kind of a planter? That's kind of, I've never seen that up here. A lot of other people were asking too. And then his next reply video was replying to one of the comments asking. And his reply was essentially well, let's use a little common sense. Remember, I do X, Y, Z. So obviously I'm going to have this kind of planter. I'm like, well, I didn't know that. I didn't know the thing that's common sense to you is not common sense to me. And I felt stupid for even asking the question. So in the back of my mind, I'm never going to ask him another question.
Yeah.
I'm not going to comment on his page again if he's going to make me feel like an idiot.
Right.
And so that's one thing we've really tried not to do. And our inbox, our emails are constantly flooded with questions. And I'm honored to have that people feel like it's a safe place to where I'm just not going to belittle them.
Yeah.
So I think that's really the answer of why we've been able to grow is people feel like they can actually come here to learn something and not get made out to be stupid.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. I see even some of the examples that you show, I think, where, like you said, a group with a particular agenda, an activist or whatnot, I've seen you do stitches where you show a quote from what they've said and then you quickly cut to your answer. And even in that, you don't belabor the fact that, hey, I don't know if this is malicious. I don't know if this is somebody who just doesn't know, but let's just take them at their word here. This is what they understand. They probably don't know what goes on. So let me show you. And you're quickly pivoting to that whole other audience that's listening to you that is not that person and also maybe heard that or has that question or that concern. But again, doesn't start out with the ideological perspective of wanting to, dislike farmers, just heard this thing or wondered about this thing. And even in handling your detractors with tact helps invite in the person who has those genuine questions that, if he can handle that with tact with somebody who is being less than kind to him, surely I can direct questions to this person as well and feel comfortable in that. So I think that's a really important thing.
Precisely. And I think feedback I've gotten is, why do you address those people? You're never going to change their mind. I know I'm not. But look at all the people we're catching in the crossfire. That some of the people might have wondered that question, but never wanted to ask.
Right.
Well, now they're getting an answer to it.
Yeah. What do you enjoy most about this?
I do think opportunities like this, and I do love sitting down doing podcasts for anybody or anything, just to have conversations, getting out and doing experiences with the Farm Bureau. But there's small aspects when you see a comment or a message from somebody that says, I started drinking milk again because of your account. Obviously, that's rewarding. I like to think my life hopefully is more than just milk to people. I joke with other people, it's how long can I keep talking about milk? But it has had its rewarding effects outside of that, just sharing about, things that are hard outside of farming and other mental health aspects that our lifestyle can take its toll and relating it for other people. But I think really just making connections. There's been sometimes I've gotten cynical doing this where you just wonder if it's even accomplishing anything, but then you do get to spend some time with people who really just enjoy what you're doing and other people who are also doing what you're doing, producing content. We were made to connect with people. And so when you actually get to experience those connections, in a joyful way, it's a very positive reason to keep doing it.
Yeah. You mentioned some misconceptions, whether they come from a place of, again, of an agenda or just purely just misconceptions. What are some of the most common misconceptions that you hear?
Depends on the year. I think in 2021, when I was first getting going, the thing I heard over and over and over was, why aren't they outside? Why aren't they in a pasture? And I still that's probably one of the top three most popular questions I get. It's like, do they ever get to go outside? Do they ever get to see the sun? I'm like, these cows aren't, they don't live in a state of existential dread. Like, what's my 5-year plan? Where am I going to go to college? They wake up, there's food, there's water. Okay, I'm going back to, And so I would say that's probably the most popular question. Lately, it's been really surrounding raw milk. And some people have this stigma that the dairy industry is anti-raw milk because we're trying to protect our profits and we don't want the people buying raw milk direct from the farmer. I'm like, well, I'm a farmer and my milk goes to Prairie Farms, but we pasteurize your milk because it's safe. Now, people say, well, raw milk tastes better. I'm like, well, there's more fat in it because it's not going through any fat reduction process. There's a whole nother underlying conversation here behind why, milk is 3% and 2% or whole milk and all
I've
those
heard
things.
you give that TikTok where you talked about, hey, this cow over here has different butter fat than this cow, but if you bring those two things together, the consumer likes consistency, and therefore,
because if you grab a gallon of milk on Monday and then you run out on Thursday, you grab another one and it tastes different. Well, I'm not buying that again.
Was this one better or worse than the other?
You buy Pepsi because every bottle of Pepsi tastes the same. You buy Dr. Pepper because every bottle of Dr. Pepper tastes the same.
Right.
We're a beverage, and we're a food. We're more than that. I like to think we're significantly healthier than Dr. Pepper and Pepsi, but we are still a beverage. And so consistency and quality is key. And that's something that raw milk just can't offer across the board. Now, I'm all for people having the ability to go get it if they want it. But to act like it's the answer is what bothers me. Sure. And to act like that it's risk-free is what bothers me. I am not against people having the choice to go. And so balancing that kind of question, the politics behind it, and that's been really popular the last 6 months, and it's something I haven't spent a lot of time addressing yet. You can just kind of run in circles and run yourself ragged. You address it once, and then the problem is you answer it in a big video that gets 2 million views. Well, then a week later you'll get a question. What do you think about raw milk? I'm like, you just answered it. So
right.
Hopefully, I kind of try to hope those people go around and find the video maybe that I already did that addressed it. So definitely cows being outside, raw milk. Yeah, the robots are a big question. Cow-calf separation is always a hot topic, dehorning, and many, many times when I've actually given the honest answers to those questions, people go, oh, okay. They just didn't know. So I think a lot of people ask and we think they're going to get I have to tiptoe. But no, if you just tell them, oh, here's why we do that. Oh, okay, great.
Right. Not assuming that someone's a potential adversary in this, but they're a potential, they just want to know, start from that honest place of answering a question and see where the conversation goes, which takes some courage to do, and it takes some suppressing of our natural, anxiety about what might happen, but it can be really productive in a conversation if we go into those open-minded and again, hopefully we're finding an ally in this situation. What are some of the biggest ahas in your mind for your audience when you share things, you really see people light up and say, like you said, either I started drinking milk again or I really appreciate what you do. Thanks for letting me know about that.
I think about that a lot. It still surprises me which videos do well and which ones don't. And so I haven't had a real aha in terms of which kind of videos always do well. And then the problem is the algorithms are always changing. But I really think an aha moment that really struck me, and this was honestly even recently here, I'm talking in the last couple months, people just enjoy seeing somebody perform their job and not hate it, and not being online just griping about it. And there's plenty of things to complain about. You can find that in any job. But yeah, we have a frozen water and it's -15, but here's what I'm doing today. And just, that's it. Just somebody people can follow that. Hopefully they watch our video and they either laugh or they leave a little bit more optimistic. But I think we've just realized people just genuinely want good content. And what makes good content sometimes isn't what you think it is. It is just being organic. Yeah. And so I think that's what I would say. I think my biggest aha moment was just the transparency and organicness. Because the minute I try to do something that comes off too influencery or too flashy, it just doesn't get the engagement. People don't buy that. People want just real, honest truth. And for me, it's just me and my phone. I rarely touch a computer. We don't have an editor. It's just us, me and my wife. And so I think that kind of speaks to people.
Yeah. And I think that there's something to be said too, and just as someone who's consumed your content, for the layering approach of that too, right? You have to show them the human side, and sometimes it's just you having fun. You're more than, like you said, Dan the farmer. You're Dan person. You can laugh at yourself, you can laugh at the situation, you can show your values in different ways, and then you can sometimes talk about those issues. And I think that building and that layering can be really helpful in helping people relate to you, so that when it is time to have a conversation about a tough issue, you've kind of built up some of the equity with people in a way too.
Exactly.
Another thing that I really appreciate, and we were talking about this before we got started here, but is the attention that you give to topics that people will care about regardless of whether or not they're a farmer. So people care about animal care regardless of whether or not they farm. They care about sustainability. They obviously care about the nutrition and safety of their milk as well. But it's not just talking about those issues, it's kind of the way you relate those issues. And again, this is something you and I discussed beforehand, but for example, you've done a video on the differences between the physiques of dairy cattle versus beef cattle. Why is this dairy cow skinny, or why does it appear more bony and whatnot? And you said, well, you know what? It's kind of like dogs. You got a greyhound and you've got a chunkier Labrador, which is more like a beef cow, right? So just because they have different physiques doesn't mean they're not both healthy. They both are healthy in their own way. I've heard you referred to as like your nutritionist on the farm there as like a cow dietitian. You've talked about what's in cows' diets, and not just explaining what the ingredients are, because again, those ingredients on the ground may or may not mean something to someone, but you also relate those in terms of like, well, this is a starch, and this is a protein, and this is a fiber, and this is a fat. And it, again, whether or not I farm or understand what those ingredients are, I understand that you as a farmer are being intentional about putting those nutrients into the cow's diet and mixing those all together. So I say all that to say I know that must be intentional, right? So talk a little bit about your approach to relaying some of these topics that, as we said, are maybe complicated for a non-farm audience.
Yeah. I originally started when I went to Iowa State in 2009 to be an ag teacher. It was late 2009 when I switched my degree to dairy science. The great thing about what I'm doing now is I get to do both. I get to be a teacher and I get to still be a dairy farmer. And I think a lot of kind of what you brought up, trying to help people relate to Labrador, Greyhound, is just kind of that teaching aspect coming out. Because I do take a lot of joy in helping people understand. I mean, and I think any teacher who might be listening to this, and if there are any teachers listening, hopefully you can relate that. When you see something finally click in somebody, in a student or whatever, there's a satisfaction in that. And I do just genuinely enjoy being around people. I do think I'm more of an extrovert. So if I can help people understand something, that brings me a lot of pride. And so a lot of those analogies and those things are just me trying to wrestle like, okay, if I had to teach myself this, what would help me understand this? And I grew up with great parents. But one thing maybe my parents lacked, or maybe other kids didn't, is just, a real like sitting down teaching thing. So my parents did a great job making sure I had everything I needed. They were very supportive of anything I ever wanted to do. Anything I wanted to try, they let me try. And so I hope this doesn't come off as me like ragging on my parents. But a lot of stuff, like if I wanted the answer to something, I had to go get it. And if I had a question about how something worked, I had to go figure it out. And so a lot of the things I knew and did were self-taught and self-learned. A lot of that, though, influenced, okay, like I said, if I want to teach people why we include XYZ in a cow diet, if I wanted to teach myself, what would I say? And that's pretty much what I say on camera. It's like, what would help me understand this? And then I just reiterate what's going on inside my head out loud.
You're able to think through that lens, again, take yourself out of your situation with the experience that you have.
Yeah.
And apply that.
So there's a joke, and this is actually about a person who is long ago dead. They lived in the 15th century, but I relate to that person that my wife has said, if you see me talking to myself, it's because I'm arguing with somebody else in my head. So I always have ongoing conversations in my head of, what if I said this? Well, no, and then it could mean that. Well, what if you said it this way? Well, no, then they could counter-argue this way. What if I argued this? Well, then they could say that. So just a lot of arguments going on in the back of my mind of trying to frame that in a clear and concise way.
We're here in San Antonio for the American Farm Bureau Annual Convention, and American Farm Bureau wanted to bring you out here to talk to some of your peers about your social media experience. You're going to talk, I know, a couple of different times to the group. Tell me what you're most excited to share with the group.
Obviously, the social media in dairy farming is something that I've been very excited about and passionate about. And so a lot of my presentation I should say the first third to half is kind of just what has worked well. Like, what do we see as trends? Because we'll see some videos, so you think I'm going to relate to Facebook. TikTok is the same way, but I think people kind of will understand what I mean when I say this through Facebook. Facebook has likes, comments, and shares. And we'll see videos, and likes, comments, shares, and views. Let's look at 4 metrics. Likes, comments, shares, and views. We'll see some videos that'll have 20 million views and 10,000 likes. But then we'll see some videos that have 500,000 likes, but but 20 million views or 10 million views. So why? Why does one video have more views and less likes and one have more likes and less views? We'll see the same thing with shares. Why does this video have half the views of the other one, but have 3 times the shares? So it's been kind of fascinating to see, like, okay, I think I know why. Like the video about Mildred, she reached 13 lactations. She was going to get sold. And some people were like, you should let her retire. Like that, took her out to her green pasture, let her live out her last days. I'm like, that's actually more inhumane than actually ending it on our terms. Because if we don't end it on our terms, it's going to end on nature's terms, which is very brutal and it's very unkind. So kindness is different as a farmer. But that video had, like 450,000 likes. But it's not my most popular video. That one with Mildred, I think, had 4 million views, but 500,000 likes. My most popular video is the one, How's a Robot Milk a Cow? Well, that's got 26 million views, but if you add all the likes up, maybe 40,000. So people just watched that and thought it was cool, but they didn't feel connected to it, right? So what's it take for you as a consumer to hit the like button?
Right.
You have to go, wow, there's something about you that goes, I approve of that.
Right.
And watching a robot, it's like, oh, that's cool. You move on. Right. But when you see a guy saying, oh, that was a really hard thing to talk about with this cow Mildred, and so that's a way people kind of connect through the screen, is hitting the like button. The same thing with TikTok. But
right.
So again, sharing those experiences is part of the presentation. The other part of the presentation, it's something I've been more passionate about in the last 6 months, is the mental health aspect of things. Something that a lot of people don't realize is when you look at, and again, not to go too morbid here, but even the suicide rate is much higher in farmers. And I don't know what it looks like between farmers who are on social media and farmers who aren't, but I hope this message still gets to people who aren't on social media, especially farmers. But I think we underestimate how much our consumption of social media, even if you're not a content creator like myself, but how much you consume shapes your social health, your mental health. And so the last part of my presentation is not distracting yourself into spiritual or mental oblivion, and to really control your consumption habits, and to help everybody understand that if you spend too much time consuming content, it will consume you. And I had felt some effects of that in terms of anxiety and pressure to keep producing content. And after you see the follower number skyrocketing, it was like, I got to keep going. And it's like, what do people want? And then all of a sudden it turns from what do people want to like, okay, what do I want? Like, what kind of content do I want to see? 'Cause that's how it started, but you can lose that. And all of a sudden you can start just trying to make things people want. What's trendy? And then you have to watch what's popular. What do people like? What do people want? Well, anybody knows that living on how other people want doesn't end well. So the mental health and balancing social media content creation, consumption, and mental health is kind of the last part of my presentation. And honestly, probably some of the stuff I'm the most passionate about, because I really see the highest, obviously advocating for agriculture is important, but I really see a strong need for talking about mental health and social media and how they correlate, because I don't think we're drawing those connections as tightly as we should.
Well, I think within your response there, you offered some good suggestions about, again, why am I creating this content, and getting back to the kind of the core of that, if you're not getting lost in what other people are wanting you to do. In addition to that, are there other things, again, for the folks that may not be in the room here, our podcast listeners here, are there things that you've learned along the way as it relates to mental health and social media that you would pass along to them, learn from the path that you've walked?
I think if I could leave one phrase with people, it'd be a restless thumb leads to a restless soul. And what I have seen, and so I'm a cancer survivor. In 2018, I went through cancer. Social media did so much more harm to my anxiety than cancer ever did.
Wow.
And I don't think we realize that. And some people are fine today. They're, well, I consume a lot of content on my, and if you look at the average American, their screen time is 3 to 4 hours a day. Mine was every bit of that for sure. And some people might be aghast at that. How could it be so high? I guarantee almost every one of us is plus 2 hours. And it takes no time at all to, here's 15 minutes while I'm waiting on the bus. Here's 15 minutes while I'm waiting for a cow to milk. Here's 15 minutes while I'm waiting for this calf to drink. Here's 15 minutes while I'm waiting for the skid loader to fuel up.
Right.
How fast your screen time adds up. I kind of relate to it too, not to sound, again, too dramatic, but it's dopamine. Social media is dopamine. And that's what cigarettes tend to offer too, in the form of nicotine. And you can smoke cigarettes until you're 70, and you're fine until you're not. And it's the same thing with alcohol consumption. You can be fine until you're not. And I think we really need to start thinking of our consumption of social media in similar ways. It's fine until it's not. And then when it's not, it's almost, I shouldn't say impossible because it's clearly not, but it is incredibly difficult to curb your consumption habits once they've been created, in the same way that it's very difficult to curb an alcohol addiction or a cigarette addiction. We as Americans, and especially across the globe, and I would say especially Americans, we are addicted to social media. And there's a friend of mine, her brother-in-law is a brain surgeon. You can't Google this. He said there's no research behind this, but he says he swears when he's looking at a person's brain, he can tell who's an avid reader and who's an avid scroller. The brain is a muscle. And when we don't treat it well, it will respond in kind. And so I think the message I really want to get across to young people is just, if you're battling with anxiety, and I don't ever want to come off as providing medical advice, because that's dangerous. But I was in the boat where I was on some anti-anxiety medication for a little bit, but I also didn't curb my scrolling habits. And I was trying to get the cart ahead of the horse. I wanted to do all the consumption I wanted with no consequences. Well, life doesn't work like that. And so for me, I got to scroll 30 minutes or less a day. I have a timer on my phone. It's 30 minutes. And when that goes off, I'm done. So I'm more intentional when I'm on there. Okay, if I want to do a trend today, I got to be in this 30 minutes. I'm going to start looking for trends. And I've had more success in the last year than I have in the first while. The first, I would say, 6 to 8 months doing it. Even though I'm spending less time, it's more intentional time. And so I think my caution, and I'm getting a little long-winded, but my caution I don't care if you're 20, 30, or 60, or 80, but is to be careful of how much content you consume for your own mental health. And I think we need to be aware of the negative repercussions that can have.
That's some outstanding advice, along with all the other advice that you've kind of provided here. Is there anything, as we kind of close out here, any other suggestions for farmers who, watch what you're doing and want to become active in effectively telling their stories via social media?
The biggest advice I give people who want to try is honestly start on TikTok. And I know it almost got banned, and maybe it will again. But while it's not banned, the reason I say start on there is because you can really do a lot of trial and error. Try some videos, see what works and what doesn't work. And if it works, a lot of people will see it. But the kind of beautiful thing about TikTok is if it doesn't work, no one's going to see it, because the algorithm rewards good videos. And sadly, sometimes it does not reward good videos. There's been videos I put up on Facebook that'll get 10 million views, and on TikTok, they literally get 2,000. So the algorithm is its own monster too. So don't, and that would follow my second most important point, is don't base your self-worth off of views. There are some phenomenal creators out there, and I'm very humbled by the growth we've had. There are creators out there who do a better job than I do, but get less views. And I don't understand that. I just don't. It's just something that's happened with our algorithm on our page. I think it's better to be lucky than good sometimes. But TikTok will offer you a lot of forgiveness as you try to figure out, okay, what kind of videos do I like producing? Because if you're going to do it for a long time, you better like it. And if you're trying to do it because you want to gain followers or you want to be famous, well, then you're going to have to cater to everyone else. That's a really tough boat to be in. So make sure you like doing it. And if you can like doing it and reach people at the same time, it's a win-win.
Thanks, Dan. One of the big things I hope we can all take away from that conversation is the importance of being someone who others can turn to with their questions. Let's face it, most folks are pretty unfamiliar with farming. And if we want that to change, we need them to feel safe and maybe even excited coming to us with their questions and concerns. That's all for this edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and that you'll join us for our next podcast episode on March 3rd. Thank you for doing the work that inspires everything we do here at the Iowa Farm Bureau, and thanks for listening to the Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcast episodes at iowafarmbureau.com/podcast. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews, and we welcome you to email us your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.